We've got some more bad news, and it seems that this just keeps on mounting. Google has filed a request or a letter to the government, and this may be followed by lobbying to the Australian government, mainly asking to make it possible for Google's AI crawlers to, by default, mine websites for content unless they're opt out. So by default, if you don't have your pages set to do not mine or whatever the standard becomes, Google's AI system will be able to get in and mine your data. So if I write a unique article on, let's say, how to rank a lead generation site, and there's no other content that covers that, or there's similar content that covers that, Google's AI can come in and copy all of my data, and then if someone asks, Bard, how do I rank a website, they will pull that information out from a website, regurgitate it or rewrite it as AI does, because AI doesn't produce original content, and provide the person who's asking the question with the answer that's mainly taken or inspired by my article. But the catch is Google is under no obligation to link back to my website, to cite my website, to send any traffic to my website. But Google wants to mine my data for absolutely nothing. So in the long term, what's going to happen is that if you have a website that makes money off, let's say, AdSense, you basically an informational site, you make money off AdSense or MediaWine, however you monetize it, there'll be no incentive for Google to even put ads on your site. There'll be no incentive for MediaWines to put any ads on your site, because no one is actually visiting your website, and Google just justify it as you not getting enough traffic, or you're not getting traffic that's enough to merit being part of the program, and you will just be demonetized. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to move from the search engine model to the AI model, where just to go and you ask a question, and other than if you were a governmental website or a media website, something that I covered just a few days ago, or a medical website, that's high authority and also probably have something to do with the government, you're not going to make it to SERPs. So this comes in from The Guardian, by the way, and this has been reported by The Guardian, and it says, Google says AI systems should be able to mine publishers' work unless companies opt out. So by default, your content is fair game. If I copy someone else's content, Google wants to penalize me. If I rewrite someone else's content, Google wants to penalize me. Google wants to even penalize me if my content is not detailed enough, so I'll not rank high enough. But Google can copy my content, can reuse my content, and I shouldn't get anything for it. This is what this works out to be. So the tech company's latest proposal about generative AI turns copyright law on its head and could especially hurt smaller content creators. Obviously, publishers should be able to opt out of having their work mined by generative artificial intelligence systems, according to Google, but the company has not said how such a system would work. Well, I would say it's already working, and they're already mining a lot of people's data. It's just that we're not aware of it. In a submission to the Australian government, review of the regulatory framework around AI, Google said that copyright law should be altered to allow for generative AI systems to scrape the internet. So, in other words, you can't use a scraper, but it should be legal for Google to use a scraper. It should be perfectly legal for Google to mine your website for all the information that it has, unless you say you don't want it done, which means that the onus is on you as a content creator to protect your content from AI by default. So, which means extra work on your part and not on Google's part. So, the company has called for Australian policymakers to promote copyright systems that enable appropriate and fair use of copyrighted content, to enable the training of AI models in Australia on board and diverse range of data, while supporting workable opt-outs for entities that prefer the data not to be trained using AI systems. The call for a fair use exception for AI systems is a view the company has expressed to the Australian government in the past, but the notation of the opt-out option for publishers is a new argument from Google. So Again, this starts in Australia, will end up in the US, Canada, probably the entire world eventually. And so if you're living in Australia, the thing that you can do is write to your local representative, wherever it is. In the US is a congressperson, it could be your mayor. Just write to that person and say you're not in this and you're not for this, and list the drawbacks of having this, which means eventually Google has total control over all content, and as a content creator you get nothing out of it. So whether you run a lead gen site, whether you run ads on your site, or however you monetize your work, you're not just going to get anything out of it. And this is Google's end game. If you don't do this, if you don't write to your local your local minister or whoever they are, and you don't make them aware of this, I don't think they're technologically as savvy as they should be to even understand what the law is in this concern and how AI is working and how Google is smart enough to start with Australia, because if they can get this done in Australia, they can use this as a precedent to get it done in other parts of the world. And so, I mean, obviously, Australian content creators are on the firing line over here. And so I've put, like, you're probably reading the Guardian article with me, but here's another interesting part. When asked how such a system would work, a spokesperson pointed out a recent blog post by Google where the company said it wanted a discussion around creating a community-developed web standard similar to the robots.txt system that allowed publishers to opt out of parts of their site being crawled by search engines. Well, the robot.txt file has nothing to do with AI. What the robot.txt file really does is say, these parts of my website I don't want crawled, which is probably maybe 3% of your website. The vast majority of your website still needs to be crawled so that it's indexed and ranks in Google search. It has nothing to do with AI. So I don't know what they're trying to do here, but they're trying to do what's called a bait and switch for obvious reasons. Keeping in mind is that, and there's a link to the Guardian article in the description. The other thing to keep in mind is that without being able to mine your data, the AI system doesn't really provide anything of value, because the value is not in its ability to create, because the AI system can't create anything. It needs to regurgitate other people's data. And so Google is faced with the dilemma. Google is not able to crawl every website or index every website on the internet. Google systems just don't have the capacity to do it. Google also does not have the processing power to do it. And so by bringing in AI, Google is really killing two birds with one stone, because it doesn't need the processing power. It doesn't also need to pay content creators for advertising. And so they'll save money off that. Plus, they'll provide people with what is seen as highly relevant answers, and they will not have to credit you or send any traffic to your website, but they can crawl your website and mine all the data off it, and then decide, we don't want to even index the site. We don't even want the site to show up on the internet. And after they crawl your website, they could just say, why not just de-index their site? They don't have great quality content on their website anyways. And so there's nothing you can do about it. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this. I think this is some really bizarre shenanigans, and I think this has to be taken to court. It has to be fought in the court of law. This can't be allowed. We cannot allow this to happen.